Okay, thank you everyone for joining us today. We're here to remember Thurman Dennis, who was a much beloved teacher in ASIJ Elementary School for more than 30 years, teacher or colleague to many of you, wonderful member of the community. So I'm just going to turn it over now to our Director of Advancement, Clive Watkins, and he will get us underway. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Good evening, whatever time of day it is for everybody. I hope you don't mind if I've actually written something as opposed to speaking impromptu. I don't do well at memorials in general, and so I really wanted to share some words with you. So I'm going to read from a prepared script. So. Again, my name is Clive Watkins. I'm the Director of Advancement. I know that most of you don't know me. I'm in my third year here at ASIJ. Thank you for joining us today to remember Thurman Dennis. He's perhaps one of the longest ever serving members of ASIJ's elementary school faculty. Thurman first joined ASIJ in 1962 and spent the next 30 years enlightening the minds and brightening the days of young learners with his enthusiasm, his warmth, and his sincerity, both in and out of the classroom. While those are all adjectives that have been used to describe Thurman to me, I am actually fortunate to have experienced Thurman's presence firsthand, specifically just this past October during a visit to New York, where we were holding the first New York post-COVID gathering. Thurman couldn't join the event, so he, Irene Gilman, and I had an outstanding lunch, which was meant to be an hour, but it turned into 3 hours. And we were reminiscing about his ASIJ days and his love of theater and art. And alumni back this up with their fond memories of Thurman's Earth Day musical productions and his Halloween costumes, which I've seen pictures included such creative masterpieces as the Mona Lisa, with a cutout for Thurman's face in the painting, of course. He was well loved by his students and co-workers alike. On reflecting on her 2 years working with Thurman, Kay Melton said, "I will forever be grateful for his gentle guidance and amazing expertise." Former librarian Vicki Downs shared, who's a ASIJ institution in her own right, of course, shared that she relished bumping into him wherever and then becoming enthralled by whatever topic we ended up discussing. Thurman was deeply involved with the school, and outside of his more than 30-year tenure as a teacher, he also served on the Board of Trustees from 1984 to 1993. After retiring from ASIJ, he of course remained an active member of the community, attending New York receptions on numerous occasions and making friends with the alumni community members long after he left Tokyo. In 1996, a room in the elementary school building was named after Thurman, which is a rare honor at ASIJ. He returned to Japan for the ceremony and an unveiling of a lightbox designed by art teacher Ki Nimori, which captured moments from Thurman's career and some of his unique costumes. Thurman dedicated his entire life to encouraging his students to explore, question, and discover. The truth is that while we are aware of the impact he had on many of his students, there are countless others who are in turn leading impactful lives because of Thurman. While he's no longer with us, he will not be forgotten. Thank you for a life well lived, Thurman. Please join me now in a moment of quiet reflection while we watch this short slideshow. Sorry, I said I don't do well at these things. So thanks for putting that slideshow together, you guys. So we'd like to invite people to share their own memories of Thurman. And I know that Dan would like to kick us off. So Dan, could I hand this over to you?
First of all, thank you to the Advancement Office team for putting together this opportunity for us to come together and remember a dear colleague, Thurman, and his work at ASIJ and the many ways he impacted our lives. And also appreciate all of you who I can't see, but I know you're out there, joining in to add your thoughts and your memories of Thurman. He indeed is a man who radiated energy and a zest for life, and certainly a warm and hearty laugh, and a long and fruitful life that touched so many people in various and positive ways. You know, my slant is really his principal and a colleague, and one of the early morning people at the elementary school. Over the many years we worked together. You could set a clock by Thurman's very disciplined approach to life. He walked in the inner circle at 7 a.m. and he left at 6 p.m. And I was there often very early in the morning, and I often sought his counsel, his perspective, and just his fun take on life. And some of those moments were some of the dearest to me. But the big thing about Thurman was he was a personality, and he was a presence, and he was one you could really depend on, a hard worker, a man of total integrity and a good heart. He inspired a lot of 8 and 9-year-olds, and that became his life's work. And he could always be counted on to embrace his students, really enjoy teasing out their strengths and to provide them a rich year of learning. He earned the confidence of parents, and he was a teacher that really actually enjoyed a great rapport with parents and enjoyed communicating with parents, and the give and take that was so essential to being a teammate with them. Thurman loved the arts more than anything, and his classroom reflected that. It was also a stage for his very dramatic approach. He definitely had a style, starting with his attire. He was a guy with some formality, wore a tie and a jacket, and of course his various coiffes over the years. But he reached children like a kind of a Pied Piper, got them hooked and interested and engaged, and his preparation enthusiasm really reflected his pride in what he did as a professional educator. It stood out to me how Thurman kind of elevated learning from whether it was a basic lesson or a class play. He could invest it with some importance, usually with a story or an example, an analogy, or even acting out something. His teaching was very precise, and he was a guy that reflected to his students that the work they did in the classroom was important, but it was also going to be an adventure with him. Another great strength I reflect on was his ability to communicate with children and how respectful. He was very empathic, and he talked to kids like adults with respect. And instead of raising his voice, Thurman was one who would lower it to a near whisper, and the results were amazing. He never raised his voice. Thurman's leadership and contributions, as Clive has attested, really extended beyond the classroom. He cared deeply for ASIJ and his association with it, and he sought to add value. He was part of a core of long-term educators over those years of the school's relocation to Chofu, who just added immeasurably to ASIJ's positive reputation locally and beyond. And as Clive also mentioned, he was a faculty trustee, showing a legacy of generous giving throughout his life as well. On a very personal side, Thurman was a person that welcomed me, took an interest in me, encouraged me, just like one of his students. And again, a hard worker, a dutiful man, an artful teacher, and one that I am very grateful to be associated with. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Peter Cooper. Peter, you wanted to say a few words. Please go ahead.
Dan, I'm glad that your memory is an awful lot better than mine. For instance, all of a sudden I remember the Halloween parades and the very creative costumes that Thurman had in just about every one of those. So that was a great memory. Thurman was also very welcoming to me when I joined ASIJ in 1991. And I always enjoyed going down to his classroom because he just had such incredible control. The kids were so actively engaged, and it was just a marvel to see this professional in action. So I was, very happy to be part of his last 2 years at ASIJ. But I also know that he was very happy to return to New York. That was his real love. So thank you.
One of his real loves, because ASIJ,
Yeah.
one doesn't negate the other, of course.
Right, yeah.
They're both really important.
Yeah.
Right, Irene?
Yeah. And I did see Thurman at a couple of the reunions in New York that I was able to attend during my tenure at the school.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to say a few words?
I wanted to thank Dan for his words about Thurman. I just knew him for a very short time, but Thurman was a gentleman and a scholar in every sense of the words. He was a wonderfully kind person. And one thing that I always appreciated about him was, in spite of how dramatic he could be in the classroom and his interest in the theater, he didn't get into the drama that sometimes swirled around the elementary school. He stayed above all that. And he really put children at the center of his work, and it was apparent. And thank you for the Development and Advancement Office for organizing this tribute to him. It's very, very special. And I just want to say, Dan, with all his years at ASIJ, his good health and good memory, he'll be doing the memorials for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Shigeru?
Thank you so much. It's so nice to see all of you. It's nice to see Clive. I got to meet Clive when we had our meeting in Boston a few months ago. So it's very nice to be together with you. People who've come before me have pretty much summarized everything that I wanted to say about Dennis. I got to share 2 years at ASIJ in 1975 through 77. What I remember about Dennis, as everyone said, was his kindness. I had just graduated from the university next door to ASIJ, ICU. I was just starting my career. Now I have retired from my institution that I have been working at for over 30 years. So I see Dennis as having been right there when I was starting my career, and he really did help me. And I remember sitting in his classroom, learning how to teach. And he was, as everyone said, he was an incredible teacher, a caring teacher. He listened, and I will forever be grateful to him for all that he taught me, and so much attention that he gave me and the kids. So thank you so much for letting me speak.
Becky?
I was blessed to work with Thurman as a third grade teacher.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, here I am, Dan. And now I'm working with 4-year-olds, Dan. Anyway, he was an incredible person. I learned so much from him. But the one thing that always I'll remember about him was when I would say goodbye. And he would say, "Goodbye, see you tomorrow." And that's still in my mind. Every day I hear that and I think, oh, I'll see him tomorrow. I loved him. He's a great guy.
You said Toodles was what he would say.
And
too.
Toodles was the other thing he would say. Toodles.
I think he said that in New York when I said goodbye to him, and that stuck in my mind. Thank you. Parsi?
Everyone, I'm Mr. Bender. It's so nice to see everyone's faces. Mr. Cooper, Mr. Bender, Mr. Dennis, and I remember him obviously as Mr. Dennis, not as Thurman. Really, I don't know how to describe him. And I'm sure all of you have the same impression. Wonderful, wonderful memories and lasting memories of him. And the one of the things that definitely stood out, Mr. Dennis, was, as I mentioned in the chat, was my third grade teacher. I don't remember Mr. Dennis getting mad at me. I think there was just one time Mr. Dennis got mad at me, and that was, of course, another student's fault. I was very respectful, Mr. Dennis, and I was furious with my classmate for getting me in trouble just because I knew what a kind, gentle, amazing person Mr. Dennis was. And one thing that stands out in all the wonderful memories I have of him as a homeroom teacher is that he always had a brooch to celebrate, whether it's Halloween, Christmas, whatever the occasion was. He always had, and I don't know if the rest of you remember, he always wore a brooch. And I was like, what a fashionable, teacher who's always dressed extremely well, but also had a lot of imagination and a lot of passion. And it really came off not just in how he dressed, but his demeanor. Again, drama-free teacher, and absolutely, when he would get upset, he wouldn't get louder. His voice would tend to get softer. And I've realized as an adult that definitely works better than getting mad at someone, to show that you really care and you're really listening to what they have to say. And so I really have wonderful, wonderful memories. I also got to see Mr. Dennis during the centennial celebration in 2002. That's now scary to say. That's now 21 years, 22 years ago. And I got to see him there as it was my first year going to work, I think. It was my early career. And I got to see Mr. Dennis with a beer, which was kind of like a dissonance to see my favorite teacher drinking with me, but definitely cherish all of his, memories of him as a homeroom teacher, but also him as just a wonderful person, to the point that you guys are all on this call, on this Zoom, no matter what our time zone is, no matter where we're located, and we hold them dearly. And I just wanted to express that as well.
Thanks, Parsi. Hi, Irene.
I met Thurman. I was on my way to Japan and Thurman was on his way out. And Peter Cooper sent him to check me out to see whether or not I could manage to live in a Japanese house. At that time, I was in a rent-controlled apartment in the village, and Thurman said yes. It turned out when I returned to New York from Japan, that my apartment that I was able to purchase, thanks to ASIJ, was 1 block from Thurman's. So I kept in touch with him. It was sort of also a conduit between Thurman and Margit. They were both very friendly and close to, they taught at the same time and almost the same span at ASIJ. And so I would periodically call him to find out and see how he was, because we're both moving on into elder years. And I was always struck by Thurman's dignity. I mean, he just carried himself so erect. But I would like to introduce his neighbors who were with him and knew him all the time that he lived in 16th Street. And that is Andy Whitebaum and Tony. I don't know Tony's last name, and they're here. we should all thank him, both of them, very much.
Oh.
Being with Thurman in his last days when he was at hospice, and really keeping me in touch, because I'd call and I'd say, what's happened to Thurman? And I'd worry, right? And so they were the ones who called me to let me know, and then I in turn called Clyde after our one function. All right, so Alan.
Thank you. Thank you, Irene. Thank you. Yeah, we've been neighbors with Thurman for the past 21 years. And I know that Peter is online too and wants to say a few words, but Tony and I, had a nice relationship with Thurman in that we shared all of the same likes with the Metropolitan Opera, the museum, and it came a time when Thurman wasn't able to prepare his meals, so he slipped a note under our door and said, I'd like to speak to you, and he knew Tony here was a great cook. And he said, well, maybe you can help me out a while. And so Tony, for the next few months, prepared his dinner, and he was so grateful for that. And I have to tell you, I've been to a number of memorial services, and I'm always amazed at the kind and nice things that are said. I'm not amazed here. We experienced all of that with Thurman, and a kind and gentle man who was always positive and a great sense of humor, and loved his apartment, has beautiful artifacts and memorabilia from his time in Japan and in the school, and felt very warmly about everybody and the children he worked with. So it really was a pleasure to know him, and we were with him, in hospice care. And a couple of years ago, he gave us a list of the people he would want us to notify in the event of his death. But before that, when we were talking, I said, why don't I notify them now, so perhaps they can provide you some support. And of course, when we did, the flowers started coming to the room, and he had the opportunity of speaking with a couple of people, and that brought such joy to him, because when we visited him, he had a smile, from ear to ear about the people he spoke with and all his memories. He also, I just want to say, he had a wonderful caretaker. I don't want to leave Ferros out. Ferros Camacho was with him for the past 5 years, every single day. I don't know if he's on tonight. I don't think he is, but he was wonderful with him, and also cared for Thurman, like he would his own father. So anything you want to say? No, it's not. Anyway, thank you for giving me the opportunity of memorializing Thurman this way, and we'll all miss him.
Hopefully I'm speaking on behalf of everybody. Alan and Tony, thank you so much for everything you did. It was wonderful to know that you guys were there with Irene to help him.
Oh,
Can only hope to have neighbors like you.
thank you.
Marion?
Yes, hi, I'm Marion Apple, and my husband and 2 sons lived in Tokyo from 1982 to 1988. And I got to know Thurman not only as an ASIJ parent. He had each of my sons 3 years apart for 3rd grade, but I also knew him as a short-term, it was about 8 weeks long substitute in the 3rd grade because one of the teachers was had to leave school because she was going to have a baby shortly. And Thurman helped me quite a bit getting to know the children in my class, and and how to prepare for the day's work for the children. But most of all, I got to know Thurman as a parent. Both my sons, they were very outgoing, as they still are. And when they heard that Mr. Dennis was a very soft speaker, at least my older son started speaking softly. They both have fond memories of ASIJ. To them, the world of Tokyo centered around ASIJ. After Thurman retired, I corresponded with him through holiday cards and let him know how my sons were progressing in their lives. And I think the last time we wrote was maybe around 2000. But when you get to the bottom of this, I really feel that Thurman gave my children the confidence that they had as they were growing up. And it's paid off. It's really paid off. And I really attribute a lot of their growing up skills, their study skills, the way they are as 40-year-old men, to Thurman. And they also said to express their sympathy in his passing. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thanks, Marion. Karen.
Hi, I'm Karen Crater-Yoder, and I overlapped with Thurman Dennis from 1983 to 1989. I was the kindergarten teacher at the Chofu campus. He was the third grade teacher. And as I've been reflecting on his teaching, I keep coming back to the element of acting. He really knew the part of teaching that was acting. He really was a dramatic teacher. But I also was so impressed with the way he used precise language with his students. And he used a very sophisticated vocabulary with them, which impressed me. On a lighter note, you all noticed the changes in Thurman over the years in those photos that we saw. The changes in his hairstyle, the changes in his glasses. He always had the most interesting glasses. His clothing, whether it was the daily clothing or his wonderful Halloween costumes. But it was one day, the very first day that we were back together after summer vacation, that Thurman, I think it was like 1985 or 1986, and Thurman said, "Well, did you notice the change in me?" And he turned his head from side to side. "I got my ears done." He had always had ears that stuck out really big, and he had them tucked. And so I was impressed that he would even acknowledge that. But so I appreciate his just his forthcoming with that kind of thing. But what a great colleague Thurman Dennis was. And it's wonderful to see so many familiar faces here.
Thanks, Karen. It was a good story. I was looking at his photo. Elizabeth?
Hi, most people knew me as Beth, and still do. I was in Mr. Dennis's 5th grade class at the end of the 60s. And he, like everyone else has said, he inspired an excitement to learn. I remember being so full of love for being in his classroom. But part of the lesson that I have told, the story I've told many people through the years, is of how I learned about injustice when I became very indignant at the injustice given to me at Mr. Dennis's hand. You see, we were in a little huddle of 5 girls, and the other girls were talking. Now, I would never do, I loved him too much. You know, I'm being a little sarcastic. I would never talk out of turn, but apparently he scolded, you know, he sought to scold all of us. The entire 5 of us were duly scolded for talking too much. And I thought that was a great injustice. So I stood up and I spoke back to him, and I got even worse punishment for that. Punishment meaning I was just asked to calm down a little bit. And after this horrible crying, tearful episode, because I loved him so much, and I didn't really want to have this kind of conflict with my favorite teacher. Well, at the end of the day, I went home and was just sharing this horrible story with my mother, and she suggested I write a note of apology or some kind of a note to him or some kind of expression, and maybe if I felt like it, some little gift of something. So I went out to the yard and caught a toad, a large toad, put it in a box with my note, and put it in his desk the next day. He was laughing so hard. He just loved it. And the whole thing was forgotten. Every kind of, terribleness of the day before was left behind, and we were back to enjoying the wonder of learning. And now what I learned was that he cared about me so much to let me express this crazy childishness and still be a part of a learning process that was not just in the textbook, but in my emotional self. And I loved him for that very much.
Excellent. Yes, sorry, laughing out loud there. Paula.
Hi, I had Mr. Dennis for 3rd grade in the 1970s. I think it was 77 or 78, maybe. And yeah, he was one of my favorite elementary school teachers. And I just wanted to, well, when I heard that he had passed away, I was remembering some of the things he taught us and did with us. And I remembered that was the year Star Wars came out, and he shared everyone's excitement with, the dramatic, the groundbreaking movie that was. And I just remember how excited he was when Star Wars came out. And then I also remembered a book that he read aloud to us, and I actually ordered it online. I couldn't find it at the local library because I guess it's like out of print, but this is what he read to us: Alvin Fernald, Super Weasel. And it was a great book. I recommend it to everyone. And now I'm going to have my son read it. And yeah, he also taught us all kinds of songs, like the Erie Canal song. And, every week, I think we had like a assembly with the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders, and we would march around and then we would sing all these songs, Zippity Doo Dah, and all kinds of American folk songs. And yeah, I think he was a really great teacher. And I just wanted to, express my gratitude towards him. And thanks for letting me talk about him.
Thanks, Paula. Peter.
I just will shortly echo what Al and Tony were saying. Basically, Al and Tony live on one side of Thurman, and I am directly on the other side. So for over 20 years, I was Thurman's next door neighbor. And as Al so well said before, we're not surprised at all to hear so many people that have known Thurman through all of his work and interactions at the school, all those wonderful qualities. We definitely had a taste of. It's funny when you live in New York, sometimes you really don't get to know neighbors. And I didn't necessarily spend lots of time with Thurman, but so many things you've said ring so true. I can tell you, I would see him zipping down 16th Street, all very nattily dressed to go off to a show or an occasion. Reminded me very much of my own British family who still dress up for things. Speaking with his slightly raspy but very quiet voice. He was always asking me what I had just seen, what shows, and if I'd been traveling, where I was going, and just had this zest for life that was, I mean, you just couldn't deny it. It's the way he spoke. It was in his body language. And I can tell you, just seeing him in our building and just him in general, he had this real joie de vivre, which I think was very rare. And it's just a wonderful memory that barely 2 months ago, when we had our building's holiday party, I was standing near Alan Tony and other people in our building in an atrium, and I turn around and all of a sudden, here comes Thurman with his aide, and he came down. He was at this holiday party with all of us, and having him there was just such a wonderful memory. But I would see him out and about all the time, and he would never mention anything about how he was struggling or suffering. He'd always ask me how I was doing, and always had an upbeat attitude. So I'll leave it there. And yes, and Tony's cooking is phenomenal. I smell it down the hall. I'm very jealous. And Al and Tony are the most wonderful guys. So I feel very fortunate to have lived adjacent to Thurman for so many years, seen all these wonderful qualities that many of you saw in much more detail than I experienced. But just to be in his presence and have Al and Tony as great neighbors has been a great gift to me. So thank you all.
Outstanding. Thank you, Peter. When Irene and Thurman and I got together in New York last October, I thought I dressed quite well, but then Thurman came up, wheeled up in the wheelchair, and he was, if I remember correctly, wearing a cravat and put me to shame. I felt very, very guilty.
You see him out going out at night, I can tell you. And I have a British grandfather who wore the same exact attire. That's why I always felt like Thurman was really part of the British side of my family because of the way he carried himself and his attire, and always had a kind word.
Excellent. The last person I have on my list at the moment is Dennis.
Yes, Dennis Adams here. And when Gail and I showed up, it was not great because Thurman was always known as Dennis. And suddenly here's another Dennis. And he was a little put out by the whole thing. Yeah. Well, that's what, sort of when he became Thurman for a while, at least. But anyway, that was my initial impression of Thurman was, you're here. Okay, where'd you get that name? Thurman had a commanding presence. That's what basically all of you have said that were in his class or knew him personally or lived with him near him in New York or whatever. He was very helpful in getting us settled in Japan when I wanted to know how you did something. You know, we were so naive, and he would go through, how to do this. He'd tell us about shows going on and things like that. So I'll never forget Thurman. He was quite a presence. Oh, his ears too. Yes. Yeah. I mean, we were just saying we remember he had his ears done too. They did stick out quite a bit when we first got there.
Yeah, yeah.
So before I leave, I'd like to give a shout out to Steve, Megumi, Paula, Sue and Frank, and Johanna, some of my former friends and colleagues. Thanks for talking.
And Paula Rogers,
Paula.
I don't know if you remember me, but you were in my art class for 1 year when Ms. Squire went on a sabbatical. But you look the same, and it's been over 40 years.
You look the same, Paula. You do.
I recognized you.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually remember when Mrs. Squire went on sabbatical.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm amazed that you remember me. Thank you.
I know,
Oh,
but
Paula,
you look the same.
Paula, you don't look any different.
Yeah, and everyone else, it's that we knew. It's great to see your faces again.
You mentioned when the Squires went on sabbatical, that was me. That was my family. My parents are Mitt and Carol. I'm Johanna.
Yeah, well, yes, Johanna, we knew who that was.
Yes.
But I just wanted to say I was unfortunate in that I did not get to have Mr. Dennis because I was a third grader when we had sabbatical. So I missed having him, but he always was there. And like you were saying, he was always dressed so well. And one of my childhood memories was that he got a new couch sofa, and we inherited his wonderful black wool sofa sleeper for our house. And I grew up with Mr. Dennis's couch my whole life. It felt like, anyway, just my childhood memories. He was always there.
Hi, I'm Bill Simon, William Simon. I'm a lawyer in New York, and Thurman came to me to do some estate planning, and he had a will and a trust when he walked out, and the net of it is that his entire estate is being left to the American School in Japan.
Wow.
So I think that should be good news to everybody. It will be something that that definitely helps the school, I think.
Bill, wow. That is huge. I'm not even quite sure. I'm sort of a little speechless at the moment. You know, ASIJ has, even though it's been around since 1902, had not had an official endowment until this past spring. And the community has been responding very, very well to projects that they want to see continued at the school. So the school now has officially, as of this year, need-based scholarships that we offer to local students to get an ASIJ education. We actually have our first student recipient this year, and we have applications for next year. And obviously, when you have an endowment and money's in the endowment, and if it's restricted for scholarships, it guarantees that going forward. We have not announced it to everybody yet, but a alumnus from the class of 1964, and you'll all get the details soon, has just established a need-based scholarship to fund an entire scholarship in perpetuity going forward. And this is normal for a lot of North American schools. It's new for ASIJ, and we're at the beginning of it. And we will have to see, Bill, if Thurman mentioned what he would like to see happen with that. But I imagine that that's going to go into the endowment and is going to do something. Irene, yes, sorry.
Yeah, you spoke with me to try to urge and sent me lots of information to give to Thurman. But at that point, Thurman simply said, I have to take care of my medical needs first.
Yep.
And so it wasn't that he completely disregarded it. It just he had major issues on his mind to be concerned about.
Yeah, Thurman
So
had
that's why it
mentioned
was
this.
not specified.
Yeah, Thurman had mentioned this to us, but ethically speaking, we don't, pursue those sorts of things. So to hear this from you, Bill, is wonderful news. It makes it a reality.
Yes, I'd add that it is an unrestricted gift and made in memory of Thurman's brother, Stanley Dennis.
My goodness, what a way to have a memorial. I want to thank my colleagues, Miranda and Matt and Sophia and everybody else in the advancement office for helping to put this together for us today. This has been great for me. As I mentioned to you, when I know somebody and there's a memorial like this, there's generally tears flying all over the place. So I congratulate myself for not losing it too badly. So thank you all so much for joining. It was really wonderful to see the love that I feel that Thurman exuded to everybody around him to be reflected back in all of the words that we heard today. You know, COVID has been a terrible thing for everybody, and I hate to say that there was perhaps a silver lining, but I think one of those silver linings is getting us all used to the idea that we can do things like this on Zoom and having them be meaningful. So it's really wonderful to bring people together, this geographic diversity, and share this together. So if there are no other comments that anyone would like to make, I thank you again, everyone, for joining us. And obviously you're going to be hearing more about Thurman Dennis and ASIJ, and we'll let you know how that goes going forward. Right?
Wonderful.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.